Welcome back, everyone. Tonight, I have something truly chilling for you. This story was sent in by one of our subscribers, and after reading it, let's just say I haven't looked at closets the same way since. It's a tale of a simple babysitting job in a quiet town. But as you'll soon find out, some houses hold secrets that refuse to stay hidden. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and prepare yourself. Darkness is here. Welcome to the nightfall. I wasn't even supposed to be babysitting that night. It was a last-minute call, the kind you only take when you're desperate for cash. Mrs. Porter, a woman I barely knew, said she found my number on a local babysitting website. She sounded frantic, apologizing for the short notice. Her voice had this edge of urgency, like she wasn't just in a hurry, but also nervous. "It's just for a few hours," she said. "We won't be out late." I almost said no, but she was offering double my normal rate, and I was a broke college student with bills piling up. So I agreed. The house was in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind that looks peaceful during the day, but feels strangely empty at night. When I pulled up, the street was eerily still. No kids playing outside, no porch lights on. Just rows of dark houses standing too quiet, too still. The Porter's house was older than the others, with tall windows and thick curtains that made it feel closed off from the rest of the world. A single porch light flickered weakly as I rang the doorbell. Mrs. Porter opened the door too quickly, like she had been standing there waiting. She was in her late 30s, well-dressed but frazzled, her hair slightly messy, her smile tight. Mr. Porter stood behind her, checking his watch. He barely looked at me. "Thank you so much for coming," she said, ushering me in. "We really appreciate it." Inside, the house was off. It was clean, but the air felt stale, like the windows hadn't been opened in years. There were no family pictures on the walls, just generic paintings, the kind you buy to fill space. Something about it felt temporary, like no one actually lived there. Daniel, the boy I was babysitting, was sitting on the couch, legs tucked under him, watching cartoons. He didn't look up when I walked in. Mrs. Porter quickly ran through the rules. No sweets before bed, bedtime by 9 o'clock, emergency numbers on the fridge. She spoke fast, like she was in a hurry to leave. Before I could even ask anything, Mr. Porter grabbed his keys. "We should go," he muttered, his voice low. Mrs. Porter hesitated, looking at Daniel. Then, almost too quickly, she turned back to me. "Call us if you need anything." And with that, they were gone. I locked the door behind them, took a deep breath, and turned to Daniel. He was staring at me now, his big eyes unblinking. Then, in a small, serious voice, he said, "You shouldn't be here." I froze for a second, staring at Daniel. His voice had been so calm, so matter-of-fact, like he wasn't warning me, just stating a fact. I let out a nervous laugh. "What do you mean I shouldn't be here?" Daniel didn't answer. He just looked past me, toward the hallway leading to the bedrooms. His grip tightened on the couch cushion. I turned, following his gaze, but there was nothing there. Just the dimly lit hallway stretching into the house, the kind that felt too long, too dark, even though I could see the end of it. "Hey," I tried again, softer this time. "What's wrong?" Daniel hesitated. Then, barely above a whisper, he said, "He doesn't like when new people come." A chill crawled up my spine. "Oh?" I asked. Daniel hesitated, as if choosing his words carefully. He glanced at the hallway again before whispering, "The man in the closet." I forced another laugh, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling curling in my stomach. "Oh, the man in the closet, huh? Is he scary?" Daniel just nodded. Slowly, I smiled, trying to make light of it. "Well, don't worry. I can fight closet monsters." He didn't smile back. Instead, he scooted closer, his voice dropping lower, like he didn't want someone else to hear. "You can't fight him. He's not scared of you." "Okay." Creepy. I glanced around the living room, trying to shake the growing unease. The house was too quiet, the kind of silence that felt wrong. I cleared my throat. "Well, good thing monsters aren't real," I said, ruffling his hair. Daniel flinched. Not like a kid being tickled, like someone bracing for something bad. I felt my stomach twist. I changed the subject, asking if he wanted a snack. Anything to move past this weird conversation. Daniel just nodded and followed me to the kitchen, never once looking toward the hallway again. I told myself it was just a kid's overactive imagination. That's what kids do, right? They make up monsters. But as I opened the fridge to grab a juice box, I noticed something strange. There was a baby monitor on the counter, the kind with a camera feed. The screen was on, and it was facing Daniel's room. The closet door was open. I stared at it, my heart beating a little faster. Had it been open before? Maybe. Probably. Kids leave their closets open all the time. Still, something about the way it stood just slightly ajar, like it had been opened just enough to peek through, made my skin prickle. Then, just as I was about to look away, the screen glitched. A flash of static, a flicker of movement, and then it was fine again. The closet door? Still open. I turned to Daniel. He was watching me carefully. Then, in a voice so soft I almost didn't hear him, he whispered, "He's awake now." That was the first moment I felt genuinely uneasy. I swallowed, forcing myself to act normal. "All right, buddy," I said, handing him the juice box. "Let's head back to the couch." Daniel took it, but he didn't move. He was still watching me. His small hands gripped the box too tightly, like he was bracing for something. I glanced back at the baby monitor on the counter. The screen was quiet now, the closet door still open. No movement, no static, nothing. It was just a closet. I told myself that again. It was just a closet. I turned the monitor off. No need to freak myself out over a dumb baby cam. We went back to the living room, and I did my best to shake off the weirdness. I turned on some cartoons, sat down on the couch, and scrolled through my phone, pretending everything was normal. For a while it worked, but then, a soft creak. I looked up, the hallway. Something had moved. I felt it before I saw it, that shift in the air, that feeling when someone is standing behind you just out of sight. But there was nothing there, just the dim hallway, stretching into the dark. Daniel wasn't looking at the TV anymore. He was staring straight down the hall, his small hands gripping his juice box so tight I thought it might burst. I forced a smile. "Hey bud, what's up?" Daniel didn't blink. Then, without looking at me, he whispered, "He's watching." A shiver ran through me. I looked back at the hallway. Still empty. Still too quiet. I laughed, but it felt thin, like I was trying to convince myself. "You know, you're really good at creeping me out," I said. "Maybe you'll be a horror movie director when you grow up." Daniel still didn't smile. Instead, he slid closer to me, tucking his legs under himself, like he was trying to make himself smaller. I don't know why, but that scared me more than anything. "Hey, it's okay," I said. "There's nothing there." Daniel didn't answer. The house felt wrong now, the kind of wrong that makes your skin prickle like someone is staring at you from the dark. I forced myself to look away from the hallway, grabbing my phone. I almost texted Mrs. Porter. Almost. But what was I supposed to say? "Hey, your kid says there's a man in the closet. Also, your hallway is giving me the creeps. Can you come home now?" She'd think I was crazy, so I let it go. But a few minutes later, another noise. This time, a soft scraping sound from upstairs. I stiffened. It wasn't loud, barely there, but it was real. A slow, dragging sound like something moving across the floor. Daniel tensed. My chest tightened. "Did you hear that?" I asked. Daniel nodded once. I swallowed. "It's an old house," I told myself. Old houses make weird noises. Pipes, settling wood, whatever. I stood up. Daniel grabbed my wrist so fast and so tight it made me jump. His face was pale. His eyes were huge. "Don't go," he whispered. I looked down at him. His little fingers dug into my wrist, his grip shaking. He looked genuinely terrified. I hesitated. Then in the quiet, I heard it again, a soft creak, this time from directly above us. The ceiling. Something was up there. I didn't want to check. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to stay put, to not go upstairs, to pretend I never heard anything at all. But then another sound came, a slow, deliberate thump. I flinched. Daniel squeezed my wrist tighter. "Please," he whispered. "Stay here." I looked down at him. His face was pale, his eyes wide with something I didn't like seeing in a 6-year-old. A fear that wasn't childish or irrational. It was real, but I had to check, didn't I? I let out a slow breath, forcing a smile. "I'll be right back. It's probably just the house settling." Daniel shook his head, his tiny hand still gripping my wrist. "It's not." I hesitated. Then I gently pried his fingers off me and grabbed my phone, flicking on the flashlight. The glow cut through the dim hallway as I made my way to the stairs. Each step creaked under my weight, the sound stretching into the silence. I reached the top. The hallway was darker up here. Even though the light from my phone was bright, the air felt heavier. I turned toward Daniel's room and stopped. The closet door was open wider now. I stared at it, my pulse hammering. Had it been like that before? No, I was sure of it. I took a step forward. Something shifted inside the closet. I froze. Not a noise, not the house creaking. A movement, like something was just barely shifting its weight. I couldn't breathe. I aimed the flashlight straight at the closet. The light didn't reach the back. The inside was too dark, like the shadows were deeper than they should be. Another sound, a soft, slow inhale. Someone was breathing in there. I turned and ran. I flew down the stairs, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might stop. Daniel was still on the couch, but when he saw me, he didn't look surprised. He just whispered, "I told you." For a few seconds, I couldn't speak. I felt stupid. I must have imagined it, right? The house was old. The light played tricks. I was freaked out because of the things Daniel said. Yeah, that had to be it. I forced a shaky laugh. "Well, your closet is definitely creepy." Daniel didn't smile. He just looked at me and said, "He's awake now." And then, the baby monitor crackled to life. A burst of static, loud and sudden. Then, through the distortion, a single whisper. "I see you." The monitor shut off, and from upstairs, I heard the closet door creak open all the way. I didn't even think. I grabbed my phone and dialed Mrs. Porter. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped it. The ringing seemed to go on forever, stretching out in the silence. "Come on, pick up." Daniel was still staring at the stairs. His little hands were balled into fists, his breath coming in short, fast gulps. Finally, the call connected. "Hello." Mrs. Porter's voice came through, sounding far away, like she wasn't even sure who was calling. "Mrs. Porter," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Something's wrong." Silence. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to continue. "Daniel keeps talking about a man in the closet, and I don't know what's happening, but I heard something upstairs. The closet door keeps moving. I hesitated, my voice catching. "I think someone's in the house." A long pause. Too long. Then, very softly, Mrs. Porter said, "Emily, what closet?" I blinked. "Daniel's closet. The one in his room." Another pause. Then, "We don't have a closet in Daniel's room." My stomach dropped. I felt suddenly dizzy, like the room had tilted sideways. "What are you talking about?" "I just saw it." Mrs. Porter's breathing became shaky. "Emily, listen to me. Take Daniel and leave. Right now." Something rustled upstairs. A slow, dragging sound. My breath hitched. I turned to Daniel. His eyes were huge, locked onto mine, and he shook his head. "Don't move." "Mrs. Porter, I can't." The call cut out. The screen went black. I stared at my phone, heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. No service. And then, a soft creak from the top of the stairs. Something was coming down. I didn't move. I couldn't. The creaking on the stairs was slow, deliberate, like someone was taking their time, knowing I couldn't leave. Daniel was still curled up on the couch, his hands gripping his sleeves so tightly his knuckles turned white. He wasn't crying, he wasn't panicking. He just sat there frozen, like he'd been through this before. I forced my breath to slow down, even though my chest felt tight. Think, Emily. Think. I grabbed my phone again, but the screen was still dark. No service. No Wi-Fi. Another creak. Whoever, or whatever, was on the stairs was halfway down now. I took a step back toward the front door, fingers fumbling on the lock. It wouldn't turn. I twisted harder. Nothing. Behind me, Daniel whispered, "It won't let you." I turned to him, my voice shaking. "What do you mean?" Daniel finally looked at me. His little face was pale, expressionless. He doesn't like when they try to leave. A shiver ran through me. Another step on the stairs. I turned toward the hallway, just as the lights flickered. For half a second, everything went black. And when the lights came back, the closet door was open. All the way. I couldn't see inside. It was too dark, too deep, like the room wasn't even there anymore. Just a gaping hole of shadows. And then, from inside that darkness, a whisper. Low, breathless. "Emily." I bolted. I grabbed Daniel by the wrist and yanked him off the couch, dragging him toward the kitchen. The back door. The back door. The moment we reached it, I fumbled with the handle, shaking it so hard my hands burned. But just like the front door, it wouldn't open. Behind me, I heard slow, deliberate footsteps on the hardwood floor. Coming closer. Daniel whimpered. I turned my head just slightly, and for the first time, I saw it, standing in the hallway, just beyond the living room. Tall. Too tall. Thin, hunched, its limbs too long. Its eyes weren't eyes, just empty pits of darkness, like someone had scooped them out. And it was smiling, not with lips, with teeth, a wide, grinning mouth stretching too far across its face. The second I saw it, my body went completely cold. Daniel yanked on my hand, snapping me out of my trance. "Don't look at him," he gasped. The thing tilted its head, and then the lights went out. The lights were gone. Everything was pitch black. I could hear my own breathing, ragged and shallow. Daniel's small hand was still gripping mine, tight enough to hurt. And then, a scrape. The sound of something moving across the floor, slow and deliberate. Coming closer. Daniel's voice was a whisper against my arm. "Don't move." I held my breath. The darkness around us felt thick, alive, like something was pressing against me, wrapping itself around my skin. And then, right next to my ear, a breath. Slow, ragged. I felt it. Something was right behind me. I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed Daniel and ran, straight into the darkness. I didn't care where we were going. I just needed to move. The air around us was too thick, the shadows clinging to my skin like they were trying to pull me in. I ran into something, a wall, maybe, a doorway. I didn't know. I just kept going. Behind us, something shifted. And then, the whisper again, right behind me. "You can't leave." I felt a cold hand brush against my arm. I screamed. Somewhere in the chaos, my foot caught on something, and I stumbled forward, crashing onto the floor. My elbow slammed against something hard. Daniel fell too, his tiny body colliding into mine. I gasped, trying to push myself up. Then, the lights flickered back on. For a second, everything felt too bright, too sharp. My vision swam, my heart hammering in my chest. And then I saw, we were back in the living room, exactly where we started, like we had never moved. Daniel let out a shaky breath. I turned slowly. The hallway was empty. The closet door was closed, but I knew it hadn't been a dream. I could still feel the cold touch on my arm, the weight of something standing in the dark with us. And then my eyes fell on something that made my stomach drop. The baby monitor. The screen was on again, and on it, a grainy, black and white feed of Daniel's room. The camera was pointed at the closet. The door was cracked open just slightly, and inside, a hand, long, thin fingers gripping the edge of the door, slowly pulling it open again. I couldn't breathe. I stared at the baby monitor, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. The hand, pale, impossibly long, gripped the closet door. The fingers curled, pulling it open inch by inch. I wanted to look away. I couldn't. Daniel buried his face in my side, shaking. Then, the feed glitched. For half a second, the screen flickered, static, distortion, a shape moving. And then, it was standing there, the figure inside the closet. Tall. Too tall. Its head tilted unnaturally, its limbs wrong. And its eyes. Black holes. Not empty sockets. Not shadows. Holes. Like if I looked too long, I'd fall into them. The screen glitched again. And then, it moved. Fast. Not a normal movement. Not the way people move. It jerked forward, like a puppet being pulled on strings. Straight toward the camera. The last thing I saw before the screen went black. Its mouth opening. I didn't think. I grabbed Daniel and pulled him back, slamming the baby monitor off the counter. The screen shattered. For a few seconds, the house was silent. Then, from upstairs, a soft creak. I turned my head slowly. The hallway was still empty. The closet door closed, but I knew it wouldn't stay that way. And then, the temperature in the room dropped. A deep, gut-wrenching cold that seeped into my skin, into my bones. My breath fogged the air. I pulled Daniel closer, backing toward the front door. "We have to go," I whispered. But Daniel wasn't looking at the door. His eyes were wide, locked on something behind me. I didn't want to turn. I had to. The hallway was different now. Longer. Stretched. The walls seemed farther apart. The ceiling too high. The corners too dark. And standing at the end of it, the thing from the baby monitor. I could see it clearly now. Thin. Hollow. Twisted limbs that shouldn't work. It didn't have a face, just that gaping, grinning mouth. And then, it spoke. Not in words. Not in any human language. A sound that wasn't a sound. A whisper that slid under my skin and into my skull. Daniel clapped his hands over his ears. Eyes squeezed shut. I tried to move. I couldn't. The air felt thick. Like I was underwater, like something was pressing down on me. The thing took a step forward. I felt it in my chest. Another step. The walls shifted. The hallway wasn't a hallway anymore. It was something else. Something wrong. I knew if it reached us, if it touched me, I wouldn't be me anymore. I forced my body to move. I grabbed Daniel, twisting the lock on the door, and this time it opened. I shoved the door open, the freezing night air rushing in, and then a hand grabbed my wrist. Cold. Wrong. Not human. Daniel screamed. I yanked my arm away, pulling him with me. We stumbled outside, my heart hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. I turned, and the door slammed shut behind us. We stood in the yard, gasping for breath. The house was silent. No movement. No flickering lights. It looked normal, like nothing had happened, like nothing had ever been wrong. I turned to Daniel. His face was pale, his eyes locked on the house. Then, in a small, trembling voice, he whispered, "He's still watching." I didn't care what was happening. I didn't care if it made sense. We had to get away. I grabbed Daniel's hand and ran. We bolted down the driveway, my feet slamming against the pavement. My wrist still burned where that thing had touched me, ice cold, lingering like a bruise beneath my skin. Daniel struggled to keep up, his little legs stumbling. Come on, I gasped. We're almost to the street. The neighborhood was dead silent. No wind, no rustling trees, just emptiness. It didn't feel like we were running through a real place. It felt like we weren't supposed to be here at all. My car, it was parked right where I left it. I yanked the door handle, throwing it open. Get in. I shoved Daniel into the passenger seat, slamming the door behind him. I scrambled into the driver's seat, fingers shaking as I jammed the key into the ignition. Turned it. The engine sputtered. I turned it again. Nothing. Come on. I gritted my teeth, twisting the key so hard I thought it might snap off. And then, the radio flickered on by itself. Static, loud and sharp. And then, beneath the crackling noise, a voice. Low, warped. You can't leave. The hair on my arm stood up. I slammed my fist against the dashboard, trying to shut it off. Daniel started whimpering beside me. He's coming, he whispered. I didn't look. I didn't want to, but I felt it. Something behind the car, standing at the edge of the driveway, watching us. I turned the key one more time, and the engine roared to life. I hit the gas. The tires screeched against the pavement as we tore down the street. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I just drove. I don't know how long I kept going, my hands clenching the wheels so tightly they ached. But eventually, the houses changed. They looked normal again. Street lights, parked cars, houses with porch lights still on. The night felt real again. I let out a shaky breath, my pulse still hammering. Beside me, Daniel was curled up in the seat, staring out the window. His tiny voice broke the silence. He let us go this time. I didn't answer, because I didn't think he was wrong. I didn't stop driving until I saw a gas station, glowing like a beacon in the dark. I pulled into the parking lot, my hands shaking so badly I could barely put the car in park. My skin felt cold and damp, my wrist still aching where that thing had grabbed me. For a moment, I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to slow my breathing. Daniel was silent beside me. I turned to him. Are you okay? I whispered. He nodded, but his hands were clenched into fists, and he kept staring out the window, like he expected to see something following us, like he knew this wasn't over. I needed answers. I grabbed my phone and tried calling Mrs. Porter again. This time, the call went through on the first ring. Emily? Her voice was sharp, urgent. Where are you? I don't know. A gas station, somewhere outside your neighborhood. What the hell is going on? A pause. Then, very quietly, Mrs. Porter said, You saw him, didn't you? I felt the breath leave my lungs. Oh, what was that thing? Another pause. Then, her voice breaking. We thought it was gone. I froze. A cold, sinking feeling crawled down my spine. What do you mean? I whispered. We moved here to get away, she said. We thought if we left, if we didn't talk about it, he would stay behind. But her voice choked, like she couldn't finish the sentence. She took a sharp breath. Listen to me. You have to take Daniel somewhere safe. Don't go back to the house. Don't. The call cut out. Silence. I looked at my phone. The screen was still on. The timer was still counting. But the line was dead. I swallowed hard, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Then, very softly, a faint breath came through the speaker. Low, raspy, too close. I see you. I threw the phone onto the dashboard like it burned me. Daniel flinched. For a long second, neither of us spoke. Then, in a small, shaking voice, he whispered, He's not gone. I turned to him. He was staring at my wrist. I followed his gaze, and that's when I saw it. 5 dark fingerprints, burned into my skin, like a mark, like a claim. I felt my stomach drop, because deep down, I already knew. I didn't escape. I just brought him with me. The moment I saw those fingerprints burned into my skin, my body reacted before my mind could catch up. I slammed the car into drive and tore out of the gas station, the tires screeching against the pavement. Daniel didn't say a word. He just sat there, staring at my wrist with wide, unblinking eyes. I tried calling Mrs. Porter again, my fingers shaking as I dialed. This time, she answered immediately. "Emily?" Her voice was frantic. "Where are you? Is Daniel okay?" I got out. I gasped. "I have him. Where do you want me to bring him?" She gave me an address. A motel off the highway, miles away from their neighborhood. She had never planned to go back. I met them in the parking lot. Mrs. Porter rushed to Daniel, kneeling and cupping his face, checking him over like she thought he might disappear. He didn't cry. He just held on to her tightly, his tiny fingers digging into her sweater. Mr. Porter was standing beside their car, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. He wouldn't even look at me. Mrs. Porter finally turned to me. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I wanted to ask 1,000 questions. What was that thing? Why did it want Daniel? How long had it been following them?" But I already knew she wouldn't answer. She just took her son, got into the car, and drove away. I stood there, watching their taillights disappear down the road. And then, just like that, they were gone. I went home, but I didn't sleep. For days, I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that hallway stretching into darkness. The grinning mouth, the empty, black eyes. They never did. Days turned into weeks. I never heard from the Porters again. Not a single call, not a single text. Their house was empty when I drove past, for sale again, already cleared out. It was like they had never been there at all. I tried looking them up online. Nothing. No records. No photos. Like they had just disappeared. It's been months now. I don't talk about that night. Not to my friends. Not to my family. But I still think about it. Especially when I look at the window in my room. Because every morning, no matter how many times I wipe it down, scrub it, polish it, the prints are still there. 5 long, thin fingerprints, pressed against the glass. Like someone is still watching, waiting. And that's why I'm telling you this now. Because I don't think it's over. Because I don't know if he's still out there, or if he ever really left. And maybe, just maybe, he's watching you now too. This story is a chilling reminder that sometimes the things we brush off as imagination are far more real than we'd like to believe. Emily thought she was just taking a babysitting job, but what she experienced that night would haunt her forever. The Porters vanished without a trace. The house went dark, and Emily, she was left with a mark, a reminder that some things never really leave us. Have a terrifying story of your own? Send it to us at email, and we might share it in our next video. Stay safe, and remember, some stories never end.